Hey guys, welcome. Musky Road Rules podcast. And now, I'm telling you what, guys, this is something that we're doing different tonight, and we're going to be doing different going forward. The podcast has always been an audio platform, and I do love just the audio version of it. But we are now going to do a complete video section of the podcast. It's going to be available in a few different platforms, and it's also going to be available on Patreon. Now, with the Patreon, it is going to be a paid subscription, but with that, you're going to get some little perks with it. We're going to get some extended footage. We're going to get some more detailed information, and we're also going to get some live chats going with this. We'll be able to do these, and you guys can ask questions as we're doing it. Some of them will be by myself. Some of them will be with guests. So this right here is going to be the new format of the podcast going forward. I think it's going to be really cool. We're going to be able to show you a lot of things. I'm going to be able to talk with a lot of friends of mine from all across the country, and you're going to be able to see them. Some of them, let's just face it, aren't meant for video, but that's okay, right? We're not all meant for video. I myself, I'm not either, but we've got a lot of good stuff that's going to be coming up on here. So for the 2025 season, it's going to be a lot of video. I've got a ton. I film every day when I'm guiding, just about. And I got a ton of stuff to put out there and a lot of stuff to teach you guys how to do it. I've always wanted to do a television show or some type of video online. But the problem is I didn't know how to do it and keep it as informative and as entertaining as possible. This way, we can go through, look at some of the video footage and actually learn something and possibly teach you guys a little bit more to where you catch a few more fish every year. So this is the inaugural one. This is not a live one. There will be live ones every month through Patreon that you can get and you can see. So guys, I hope you like this. And as always, you can text me on the text line at 606-776-6729. It's the Lunge and Lures text line. And, if I was thinking, I could actually put a Lunge and Lures logo up right now and maybe show you a few of the baits. But, again, this is the first one, and I'm still learning what I'm doing here. So, but it's 606-776-6729. Again, Lunge and Lures. Make sure the 22 short, 22 long, 22 SS. Makers of many of the fine quality crankbaits. Also, they've got the Lunge and Tail, the DC9, DC10, and the Nutbuster spinnerbait. So check them out at lungeandlures.com. Now, guys, I'm going to bring on two of my guests right now. My guests here are Mr. John Betty and Greg Thim. John Betty of Stealth Tackle and Greg Thim of Extreme Musky Lures. Guys, how's it going?
Great. Real good.
All right, you guys are my guinea pigs for this. We talked about this. So definitely look smart. And the only thing with this podcast now, guys, is I have to wear a shirt, but I still don't have to wear pants as long as I stand up, which is a good thing. Mr. Tony Grant is not on here because he has a problem with that. Trust me, I've roomed with him at several years at fishing shows. But if you guys can see there, the one thing that I wanted to show and talk about is this Ohio Muskie Show, which is who's really sponsoring the podcast tonight. Is the Ohio Muskie Show coming up at the end of January, 24th, 25th, 26th. And both of these guys are going to be there. John, what are you going to be doing at the show this year?
This year at the show, we'll probably have our same spread as we usually do, probably in the same spot, I assume, depending on what the promoters decide. And I'll also be
they're
doing
nice
a seminar.
People.
What's that?
Oh, they're nice people.
Those promoters?
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll be doing a seminar on terminal tackle, I believe on Friday, it looks like on the sheet. Originally, Tony said Saturday, so there might be a problem with the video I cut for you. The time adjustment might need to happen, but
well,
we're used to going on the fly. So I'll be talking terminal tackle on Friday at 3:30. And we'll also be doing some leader pack giveaways to all the people that attend that are in the room all the way through the seminar. So we'll give away a few of our leader packs and should be a good time. I'll also be bringing some product from Musky Mayhem. So I'll have some of their stuff there. maybe a few other surprises as well, depending on what people give me that can't make it down for the show from after the Chicago weekend.
Sure. And Greg, what are you going to be doing there?
Well, I've got a couple new baits out this year. I think they're going to do really, really well. One's a very shallow bait. It's called the Sub X. I know we'll talk about it a little bit later. And then I've got a jointed bait for the first time. I've had many requests over the years. I finally made one for this year. I'll be in the same location just as you come into the second room right in front of the bar. So great spot in the venue. As always, kids will get free T-shirts, so please stop by the booth. And this year, I'm also giving anybody that does a purchase with me with Extreme, they will also get a free T-shirt. So
my word,
got a lot of different new colors. Yeah, it's just something. It's a great thing. I've had a lot of support over the years. It's my home show.
How big a T-shirts are you going to be making? Because I'm going to be eating a lot here over the holidays.
Well, believe it or not, I have some up to 3X.
What did you say? You cut out there on me.
I think that.
Which one did you say? You cut out there, Greg. What did you say?
Oh, I said up to 3X.
Up to 3X. Okay. All right. So, then, I know a few boys. We might have to sew some together, but that's all right. They'll be good. The other thing we're doing this year too is, if you guys can see the flyer there, is we're doing the Kids Day on the 26th. That's going to be taken over by Lungin Lures. They are going to do a kids lure painting. They've done it in the past, and it seems to be really a cool thing. Kids can paint their own lures and take them with them, and it's always a good deal. They do a real good job with that. So, guys, if you want to bring your kids in, that'll be on Sunday from 10:30 to 11:30, and that's kind of the really that's the big thing that's going to be happening there on the Sunday. And we also shortened it an hour on Friday as well, so we're only going to go to 7, because if you've ever done enough sports shows, you know that last hour is just vendors bitching because no one's there. So that is what we're looking to do. So. But let's get going here. John, I want to talk to you a little bit about your leaders. You are the leader man, and you know the all different lengths and stuff like that you make, and there's a ton of different varieties of leaders out there that you're using. You know, the one thing that I get a lot of questions on is, this. What is the, wire fluorocarbon? Okay, what is, in your opinion, okay, in all of ours opinion, when do you think you'd use the wire? When do you think you go to fluorocarbon? Is it just a personal preference?
A lot of it is personal preference. However, there's a time and place for everything. With fluorocarbon, if you're fishing ultra clear water and, or very high pressured water, the fluorocarbon helps give the invisibility factor to the baits. So you gain a little bit with that. Now, I predominantly use wire. I feel like wire, the baits respond a little bit better to wire, and you get a little bit more maybe vibration out of it as well. The problem with fluorocarbon is if you're using, if you're using average size musky lures, the fluorocarbon really isn't a problem. But as soon as you start downsizing, that's when you start running into a problem with fluorocarbon, because fluorocarbon is really bulky. Even though it's invisible in the water, it's still thick. If you downsize your fluorocarbon too much, then you're risking getting bit off, because it's not always about the pound test as it is about the thickness. The abrasion resistance is what we want. So when you go down to your smaller baits, you're better off moving over to wire, thinner diameter, less resistance. Also, if you're in contact with a lot of debris or rocks or what have you, wire's going to hold up a little bit longer and better for you.
Yeah, I personally I used to be fluorocarbon a lot, but it seems like now I'm actually going to a lot more wire. So when you, and then I think one of the big things is when people are out there and they're fishing, they're going to these smaller baits like here, we're using the little bitty crankbaits and stuff you can see as it flies out of the water. That's the KVD, the 4.0s. So bass style baits, to me, style baits are huge in the spring and actually throughout the whole year,
Right.
and instead of bulking the bait up, okay, and putting bigger hooks on it and stuff. And Greg, I'm sure you've seen this too, especially on your small stuff. When you start putting big hooks on these baits, the problem is that you're going to kill the action of the lure. And, and using these big leaders and using these, not only the leader, the snap means a lot, right?
Size of the snap.
Yeah. The size of the snap is huge. And so by doing so, by going to the smaller stuff, especially like your little 6-inch leaders, I really, really, really like those. Those are great for the small baits early in the spring. Now, how do you feel, with your stuff as far as with the trolling stuff as well? Do you use the lighter stuff there?
It depends again on the size of the lures. Smaller lures, I'll use lighter leaders. I still predominantly will use fluorocarbon, and a lot of guys are still using fluorocarbon for trolling. The fish don't attack those lures the same way, so there is a little bit more give and take. You could go a little bit lighter. Guys will run down to like 80-pound test on the smaller baits in the spring because they still want the invisibility factor. One of the things we came out with a couple of years ago, last year, end of last year, was a solid wire trolling leader, which we've had a lot of success with those because with the solid wire, super thin diameter, and a lot of guys also, Greg, as you know, since you started experimenting with the wire line.
Sure.
You've gone to that. So you're using the wire line, and then you got a fluorocarbon leader. Well, one of the benefits of using the wire line, the Mon-El trolling wire, is it gives off sound and vibration. So you have that transmitting down the line, and then you have the fluorocarbon leader, which essentially isn't really transmitting that much sound. So you're kind of killing that sound wave. So by going to the wire leader, you're able to still get that vibration and sound off of it. And then one other thing about those snaps, like you mentioned, you see those there. That's the one bigger one is a number 5 stay lock snap, which on your average size musky lures is going to be the go-to snap. But when you start using the small stuff, that's when you want to go down to something smaller like this number 3 size snap. That size of a snap can make that much of a difference with those smaller lures.
Well, it's huge. And then also with the trolling leaders, I've been a huge proponent of the fast hatch snaps that you make and put on there. So like I've got this video here, you're going to be able to see that fast hatch. We're trolling along here. It's early spring. I'm doing what I'm normally doing, checking Twitter while I'm trolling along. Rod goes off. And we're using smaller baits here. This fish was actually caught on a 4-inch Wiley, one of the shallow running 4-inch Wileys. Well, again, it's a small bait that doesn't have a lot of vibration anyway. You use a big bulky leader, that thing's going to really kill the action. Right. So what I did is you made me some 80-pound 24-inch leaders with the little fast hatches on there. And the other thing too is the more vibration those fish that you get, you can look at the color of that water. I mean, that water is typical early season water. I mean, Greg, you fish Ohio. I think Ohio doesn't get any clearer than that sometimes.
A lot of times, no. But yes.
I mean, that's what it is. And so when you're using, and you're actually, sorry about that, when you're doing that, I think the lighter leader, the lighter snap, and the fast hatch to me is the way to go trolling. I mean, there's no way if it's cold out, if it's, or if you're wearing gloves, that fast hatch is so much easier. Or let's just say your fingers are tired and you can't open a stupid snap. The fast hatch is super easy. It's just a wrist twist to put it on, to put it on the bait. It's super, super easy. So
I don't have a bait here for that. But
I wish you would be prepared. I told you to prepare for this. You had all day to prepare.
It's a little small to go on the Willie, so let's see if I can get it on here, though. It's a smaller.
Let's see. Don't get nervous. Don't put it on the split ring.
Oh, then I gotta.
Come on, stick it out. There you go. Look at this. Magic in the making, folks.
The normal size would go on here easily. This is the smaller. This is the number 4 for the small baits.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it.
Yes, we know. We know you're struggling. It's okay.
Anyway,
but it just
goes on, twist on, twist off. With the smaller size, it just isn't gonna
wax on, wax off. I like it.
Right. Yeah. So, I need the bigger size. I don't have that here. So
exactly. Well, here's another question. This is something else I get asked. I hear people ask, especially at seminars, and I'm sure you've been asked this too, John. How do you choose a leader to match your lure? What are you looking for there?
Well, everything is going to be dependent on the size of the lure as far as how big and heavy they are. If they're bigger baits, you could go with a heavier leader. If you're the heavy fluorocarbon's going to be good with your average size, say your cowgirls, even blade wise down to 8s. Your heavier rubber, you want to stay 130 and above on like bulldogs and that. You want to, and the swimming dogs, if you're using fluorocarbon, you want to stay over 100, preferably 130. And late in the season, you want to go even heavier to like a 150 to a 180 when those fish start headhunting those rubber baits.
Sure.
For tubes, I prefer to use solid wire, and the main reason is, Greg, the leader, a lot of times when those tubes fall and drop and dive, that leader will lay up against the lure.
Yep.
So you're running into a problem there.
Same thing with walk the dog baits.
What's that?
Same thing with all the walk the dog baits. You want a straight wire leader, something that's not going to swing around and get.
And again, the wire is, with the walk the dog lures, they're big, heavy, like our the Willie Topwaters or Weagle style bait. You would think you could use a big, heavy leader with that, but they sit low in the water. They can be kind of finicky to work. So a fluorocarbon leader is going to have your, you got swivel on there, you got knot crimp. It's a lot heavier and a lot bulkier than a streamlined wire leader without the swivel and what we would call the walk the dog style leader.
Yeah.
Which would be eliminate the snap on the end. So you just got a loop where you're tying your line to.
Sure.
And it's just a simple light, and it's super lightweight. It's virtually weightless. So
I think
that's the way to go with those walk the dog style lures to keep the noses up.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good way to look at all topwaters, right? I mean, because how many times have you thrown a prop bait out there and you make a really long cast, you throw it out there, it lands, and the first 10 feet of the cast, it's underwater. That happens with a lot of prop baits as well. So I think a light leader for surface baits, light wire leader for surface baits is a huge thing.
If the rule of thumb is you really, anything that goes side to side, glide baits too, you really don't need a swivel on it. Swivel comes into play on a leader when you have rotating lures. Not necessarily if the lure isn't rotating, you really don't need to have the weight of a swivel pulling the nose of the lure down. So you can get away with just a direct tie, or in some cases, like on the smaller baits, one thing that a lot of guys like to do, they take our standard spring leader, which is a loop and a small solid rig.
Yep.
And they'll invert it and put a small snap on there and then tie to the solid rig. So you're eliminating the weight of the swivel, but you're still getting that second hinge for those little glide baits or small twitch baits to get their full movement and action on.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I really like that, and the leaders and terminal tackle stuff like that all play a huge part when you're fishing. And then
we experimented, up on Lake of the Woods the past couple of years too with throwing smaller crankbaits, and that's what when we started doing that a few years back, that's when the wire, you really noticed there was a difference in the wire, like taking the small crankbaits like Greg makes and the small Bosch heads that I use up there, using a standard size leader, even a full length wire leader with a swivel and a snap on it was inhibiting the action of those lures, or just, getting a lot more action off of going to a lighter, little bit shorter leader, and you're able to just get more action out of twitching those smaller crankbaits.
Sure. Last question for you, John, is why are leader length important for trolling and casting? I know why I think they're important. Why do you think?
Yeah, the longer length leader for the trolling is, a lot of times fish will wrap up in the line. So if you're using a short leader and that fish rolls and it rolls up into your line, rolls a couple times, it's going to be up into your main line, which is they can cut it with their gill plates or their teeth a lot easier than they could cut the leader material. So you want the longer length. The other nice thing about a longer leader when you're trolling is that you could, on the front end, you can hang your cannonballs weights off of them to get the baits to go a little bit deeper. And then these things will also collect the weeds too. So,
yeah, and it doesn't even have to be a weight. I mean, just the swivel itself, some will catch the weeds, or just, you can run a hook, you can do all kinds of
I've
stuff.
had guys put hooks on the just put a snap on and run it through and hang it on the swivel.
Sure.
And it catches weeds. So you're having to pull these baits in and clean them a lot less,
Well, the thing
casting
is too,
aspect of it. What's that?
No, I was going to say, the thing is about when you run a hook on there, remember that there's hooks, or cut the barbs off, because when you go to pull weeds off, oh boy.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I've hooked myself a couple of times really good with the weed hook. So one thing to remember.
Casting wise, again, it's going to be determined by the baits. I want the longest possible leader that I could use that will not affect the action of the lure. A lot of guys are going to short leaders throughout the whole year.
I am.
And, it's a give and take. So you just got to remember, you get a fish that headshots that short leader, and you're going to, your risk of getting bit off is going to be a lot higher. And I've had it happen where guys have bought them from me and then went back the other way because they ran into a problem of getting bit off. So, it's a give and take thing with the length thing. So I want the longest possible leader that's not going to kill the action of the lure.
Yeah. The reason I like the shorter leaders is for this situation right here, to me, I like getting that lure as close to the rod tip as possible for the figure eight. Mm-hmm. And the reason is there I'm running a little bit longer one, and I don't feel like I can turn it quite as well. Now, I still get this fish to bite, but I'm using a 10-foot rod, right? That really, really helps. I like getting look at that. That is quite the angler right there. That is quite the angler. It is, the leader length to me, the closer I can get that, the closer I can get it to the lure, the more control I feel I've got with that bait on a figure eight. And that right there to me is a really, really big deal. Look, Mike McDonald with the net job right there, Greg, and that's Lulu's camera work. So quite the photographers I had.
Yeah, and like I said, it's a personal preference thing too. You like it, you like to have it shorter up to the rod tip, and I want the longest possible. So, there is some personal preference that's involved in that. It's where you're comfortable, what you have the confidence in. But like I said, you just got to realize it's a give and take thing. And you're accepting the fact that, okay, if I'm going a little bit shorter, the risk factor does go up a little bit.
Sure. No, I totally get it. So good stuff. Greg, them.
Hey, hold on, Greg. What? Can I throw something at John real quick?
Oh no. Yes.
I got heavy weights. Careful.
No, this is good. And he didn't even pay me for this. So many of you guys know that I go on far northern trophy pipe trips. Right. Northwest.
I'm waiting for my invite still, but
yeah, you're always welcome. But I catch anywhere from 250 to upwards of 500 fish in a week, up to 47 inches on these trips.
Not to brag.
I can honestly tell you, my last 3 trips, I never changed my fluorocarbon leaders once during the week. I put new ones on when I started, and I ended with them.
That's
that is a testament. Now I use the 12-inch. I think they might have been 100 or 130 pound. But they just hold up super well. Maybe I've been lucky, probably, but that's a lot of fish. When you think some people might catch 10 or 20 or 30 muskies a year, when you're catching 250 fish in a week, that's a lot of fish in their whole
It'll hold up.
So
it doesn't get nicked up too bad. You know, if you start getting nicks in it, then that's when you want to switch it out. You know, if you can run your fingers down the fluorocarbon and you might feel a few little burrs there, it's probably okay. If your thumbnail and you run it down, it like stops in the material and there's a sizable nick in there, that's when you want to get it off of there. But it doesn't really go bad. So
no, it all comes down to just, you know, if it's nicked up or how bad the nick is and all that. But no, that's amazing. That's a lot of pike, because pike are just gnawing little things anyway. And now you're dealing with some huge ones up there, and so those fish are getting a lot of those leaders are getting really tested out.
Yeah. So those pike up there are totally different animals. And those numbers that you threw out, I know for fact from other friends that go do the same thing. That's not a bragging number. That's
what it is.
You know, how many you're going to catch when you go do it.
You know John Mitch,
right.
know, yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
I've got an old customer that's done it forever, and it's pretty wild what it can do. But Greg, let's talk a little bit here about some crankbait stuff. How do you make a crankbait? I mean, it's something people.
Oh man.
You know, I mean, it's just a piece of something that wiggles, right?
Well, so, I started probably about 15 years ago, and across the basement over here, I've got a tub that's, I don't know, 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet full of rejects. A lot of trial and error.
That was my nickname in high
school. And it really, well, a lot, and the paint jobs were just awful.
Oh,
I mean, just awful.
I know all about that.
You learn as you go, but I started out cutting them by hand, and then I've become a lot more efficient. I actually have CNCs now. I've designed the lures, in Fusion, a CAD program. I cut them, I route them. I do through wire, which you can either use screw eyes or use through wire. I've chosen to do through wire. Either way works. I've just always thought the through wire was a little more heavy duty. If something breaks, you're still going to get the fish in. I use all my crankbaits are done with PVC. I've been doing that for, I don't know, probably the last 10 years or so. And then my glide baits that I make are made out of hardwood.
Okay.
And those are completely different weighting, et cetera.
Greg, can you pull the camera back a little bit? You're getting covered up there by your deal. Are you able to move back in the chair?
What's that?
Can you back up just a little bit there? You're getting a little covered. There we go.
Oh,
now
sorry.
I can see your mouth moving, so I know it's you.
Oh, it was cut off. I didn't realize it was cut off. It wasn't on mine.
It was AI. What?
Yeah.
So with that, I mean, what got you in to making crankbaits?
It's funny because I remember when I first got started. I grew up musky fishing near Clear Fork Reservoir, which is in central Ohio. I was like 5 minutes away from there. So I grew up fishing and bass fishing in my grandma's pond. And I'm like, man, I got all these woodworking tools. I ought to just start making baits. And I remember going to a meeting, and Bill Crane was there, and I showed him one of my prototype baits, and it was awful. And he said, that looks pretty good. and I was just like, okay, I know he's pulling my leg. Yeah. But, it just started, and then, one thing led to another. I gave some out to people, and then they caught fish on them, and then they wanted to buy some, and, one thing led to another, and now, just about every year, my baits are in the top 10 for number of muskies returned for Muskies Inc. in the nation. So it's that's pretty cool.
No, it definitely is. And, with crankbaits, a lot of it is, to be successful is you got to know how deep your bait's running. Right. So, and I know you sent this to me, and I think people should definitely, look at this. I'm going to change this over and let everybody see. This is kind of your
number one question by far, that when people come into my booth, how deep do the lures go? And so I actually have this printed out on foam board in my booth now in a couple different places, because I can just go right to the model, line out. This is approximate, depth, speed, line, all of that stuff, factors into it. But, it's a great tool. And I get a lot of people that don't put it on their phone. They'll message me, and I have it right on my phone, and I instantly send it back to them. But it gets you pretty doggone close, and it's a good tool to have. I'm surprised a lot of other crankbait makers don't.
Well, now there's that book out there, Musky Mike's Trolling Secrets.
Oh, that's true.
It's it has a the book's a little old now, so it probably needs to be updated with some of the new baits on here. And for people to reading this, it's, you can see it's 15 feet of line out. With your mini, you'll be down 3 feet, 20 feet's 4. And you're doing, now, did you do this? Did you make this yourself? Did you go out and see when it hit bottom or what?
I did, as well as some of my customers that test my baits. So they get out way more than I do. So, but yes, I used, other people to help get me that. And also my new baits, I'll have that added to this, depth chart for the shows as well. My new joint.
Yeah, bait. No, I think stuff like this and being able to figure, knowing this will help you out a ton when you're out fishing, especially if you're trying to troll a weed edge or if you're trolling open water. Knowing how far your bait's down is going to definitely help you out when you're out there and you're wanting to try to put it in certain areas. It's a huge thing.
Absolutely.
Guys, if they don't have this type of chart for the baits that you're using, all you got to do is let out some line. You want to have a line counter if you can, and let out 20 feet. And if there's a sand point or a sand beach or any place, where it's a pretty clear bottom, just start letting line out there and see when that bait hits the bottom, right? I mean, just watch the rod tip, and that'll kind of give you, for all those baits, what it's going to do. And even with this, John, your leader and your snap size is going to affect this as well.
Right. If you're using a heavy fluorocarbon leader, the bait's not going to get the depth as fast, or even in general, it's just not going to run that deep, versus using a thinner diameter wire or a thinner fluorocarbon leader so that you can get the depth out a little bit better.
Sure. Yeah. No, it definitely is a cool thing. So, Greg, I know you've got some stuff, but what's new this year?
Yeah. Hey, just one other point on the depth chart. I don't want to get into the live scope debate on here, but one of the things that live scope is really good for is turning that live scope back if it's on a pole mount, and in forward mode, shooting in the back, you can actually see how deep your baits are running. You can see the leader, the snap, everything. Sure. It's amazing. No, I know exactly. Used properly, that is an awesome tool.
I totally agree. I love how with the forward facing, if you turn it backwards, you can see that. What also is neat about the forward facing, and again, I'm not getting into this discussion, good or bad, but one thing that it just does is it shows you, if you're trolling bait, how that bait, sometimes the reading you get on your graph is false because that bait goes down when you go over top of it. And that bait will shoot right back up once it gets away from the boat. It's really, really interesting. You might be out there trolling bait and you're like, oh man, this bait's down 20 feet today. Well, it might only be down 10, but when you go over it, it goes to 20 and comes right back up. Right. So it's just something neat that I, using the live scope that I have over the last few years, the stuff you can see, it's really, really interesting. But Greg, what's new?
If you got a walking bait too, it's really cool on live scope because you'll see that bait as it's walking. It goes up in the column, and back down as it's walking.
Sure.
So that's pretty neat.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what do I have new this year? I have had, so Greg's got the video. This is my new jointed bait. It's the JM6. It's about a 6-inch bait. This one here is in a white bass, kind of shadish pattern. But it's got awesome action. It kicks a little bit. You can cast it down to about 4 to 5 feet. And you can get about 8-9 feet after about 45 feet, I think is what we were getting, if I remember correctly.
How, Greg, on that bait there, how fast can you run your jointed stuff?
Yeah. I was running it at 5 miles an hour just to see if it would run, and it was fine.
Okay.
Probably could go more. We don't usually get very many people that run more than 5.
Sure.
Most of our folks in Ohio are 3.5 to 4.2.
Yeah. Back up a little bit, Greg. You're eating
one
your
thing
name
on
tag.
this too, the way I've designed this, there's a split ring in between the two sections. Okay. So you can add different color back ends on here if you want to get really crazy with color combinations. So I'll have some additional colors. So if you wanted a black with maybe a chartreuse back or an orange back, you could get different back ends and put those on there to give you just different color combinations. Plus also, if it gets chewed up, you don't have to replace the whole bait. Maybe it's just the back section that you need. So,
that's kind of
can do that.
That's kind of interesting. I don't know if I've ever seen that.
Yeah.
John, have you ever seen that?
No, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. What made you do it that way?
But it's got a really cool action.
Yeah. What made you do it that way?
So because I'm doing through wire makes jointed baits really more complicated, because with screw eyes, you can screw it in with an open eye, put it in, and then clamp it down. Well, with through wire, you've got 2 ends.
Hold it up a little higher, Greg.
You have to.
Greg, there you go. Yeah, there you go.
You've got 2 ends that you would have to actually get in there when you're doing the tail loops. Sure. And there's just not enough room to do it and connect them.
Gotcha.
It's just, at least I couldn't. So that's why
I've always heard with jointed baits, especially guys that hand make them, they hate making jointed baits because it's like making 2 lures.
It is.
And so it's more time.
So you think about it. On each one of those, I now have to do 2 separate pieces on the epoxy wheel for 2 coats. So yes, it is like doing 2 sets of through wire, but that jointed bait has done well in the testing that I've had out with some of the customers. I know a couple guys the first time out, they got fish on them. But I just had a lot of requests over the years, and I said, okay, I'm finally going to make one. The minis have been awesome, the shallow shads, the walking shads, but it was time to do something a little bit different. So that's one of the 2 new baits that I have. The other bait is my Sub X.
Okay, and is this the Sub X right here?
Yep, that's the Sub X. It'll run about 1.5 feet on a cast, and even trolling. I was shocked. I didn't make it for trolling, but I ran it. I think this video is just with like 2 feet of line out, and that was at 4 miles an hour. I had it running at 5 miles an hour next to the boat. I was shocked that it was still running.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of wiggle.
Casting, it is. You can see how much it's thumping. It's got a crazy wobble. I designed it because a place where I fish is really shallow. This is in my new green lantern pattern, black with chartreuse and silver. But my first 5 times out with it, I caught fish. I had multiple fish each day on it. So it runs 1.5 feet or so down. Great fishing over emerging weeds, over stumps, gravel piles, whatever. And then you can also twitch it, and it almost suspends. So you can stop that thing, and it's a super, super slow rise. Okay. And of course, both of them have a rattle in them. All my baits have a BB in between the eyes, so it's got that little tick rattle in it. 2 coats of epoxy, all through wire, of course, and 4X strong hooks. So I make all my crankbaits pretty much the same way.
Sure. Well,
so those are my 2 new ones.
Well, good deal. Last one here is, what are some tips on tuning crankbaits? I mean, because that's a huge thing when especially when you're trolling. I mean, here's for example, we're trolling a little bit here. Let me rewind this. But we're trolling. You can guess where we're at. There's a dam. And we're talking about dirty water. Well, I mean, this is early spring again. I'm checking Twitter. And it's, tuning baits, especially when I'm running a 6-rod set here, right? All off the side of the boat. And if my baits aren't tuned perfectly, they're going to get tangled, especially running short lines like I am. So maybe give guys some tips on tuning crankbaits to make them run faster or just straighter.
Yeah. So I really try, just like all of the other makers, we try to get them tuned out of the box, out of the package, and they're good. But that doesn't always happen. I have a little tank down here that I test them, but again, that's just a 6-foot test, a pull test. The biggest mistake that I see people making is they overcorrect when they try to tune. In other words, if you're bringing that bait back and it's going to the right, what you want to do is take that line tie and just barely move it back to the opposite way. It's almost like a pressure thing. It's not even you have to move it really far. But we have Booker made a lure tuner, which was really nice. In Chapter 41, we've got some that a guy milled. But you can use, regular, pliers, etc. But the main thing is,
I like not to interrupt, but for me, the best pliers for tuning baits are the blue-handled split ring pliers. Whatever, John, hold those up. Those
I've
right
got
there
them here on my table.
John's got some.
Yeah, that's
because they're very small, they're narrow. On small baits, they get in there really nice. Everybody in their boat should have these. Just because it makes things so much nicer. And to me, you can just barely tick those baits, whether it be to the left or the right. And sometimes, you might have to twist, even put a little twist in that eyelet up there to make them go. Do you have a bait there with some pliers you can kind of show guys? Greg, if you can,
give me a second.
All right. Well, don't leave, because this will get really weird, if you're leaving us. But John, you're going to have those pliers at the show, aren't you? At the monkey shows?
Yep. They're made by Huron, I guess is how you say it.
Okay.
And we're usually stocked pretty good on these.
Those are the best. They're the best split ring pliers you'll ever have, and they're also the best pliers for tuning a bait. If you don't have a tool, like Greg was saying, that somebody can actually mill one. I've got a few of them myself. But those pliers like that are the absolute best to keep in the boat. So, Greg, maybe show people here how to go about tuning a bait.
Yeah. So, hopefully we can see this. So this is the Sub X, and let's just say that it was running this way, off to the right. Okay. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take
bring it a little higher. There you go.
Situated here. Trying not to hook myself. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're just going to get on that and just barely go this way. I mean, barely. I mean, it's, again, if you go too far, it's going to just completely go the other way. And unless it was really out of tune when you got it. I'm usually pretty cautious about that and make sure that things are pretty straight. But believe me, it can happen. Even with a through wire bait, if it doesn't, keep in mind, I'm drilling this with a hand drill all the way through these blanks. Okay, so they may not be 100% perfect, but I try to be. But they could be in there at a slight angle, which can cause different, sometimes it works out to people's benefit because it has crazy action. But you're just barely going to just take that and just twist it just a tiny bit. That's the best thing I can do. Like you said, Greg, twisting it is also an option. The other tip that I would say, because we're dealing with Lexan and with epoxy, what I like to do is I like to keep my thumb on the Lexan to relieve some of the pressure if I'm taking that and turning it a little bit, because you can hear the epoxy actually try to crack if you're too hard.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is like what you said. I think people, when they go to tuna bait, or actually tuna crankbait, is that they try to bend it too hard. I mean, sometimes it's just a little flick 100%. Of the wrist. I mean, it doesn't have to be much.
Yep.
And, and let's face it, some baits aren't meant to go really fast, right? Some baits aren't meant to go 5 miles an hour.
Correct.
Some baits, especially a wide wobbling bait, sometimes that bait won't go that fast. So you gotta, every bait has its sweet spot as far as the speed goes and everything. And some baits aren't meant to be ran. Let's say it can run really good at 10 feet of line out at 4 miles an hour. But that same bait, when you put it 40 feet back at 4 miles an hour, that thing might tangle every rod that you got out. All right. So it's important to know that.
Yep.
But getting that bait in tune, that's a huge part of musky fishing, and learning how to do that and not over tune these baits. That's a huge thing. So I mean,
I think another tip, Greg.
Sorry.
I think another tip that people also maybe overlook: if you're running a bait that has movement to it, walking, wandering, whatever you want to call it, don't put that in the prop wash. Don't put it even near the prop wash. Because it's already walking and it doesn't need that additional turbulence, because then they're just going to start blowing out. And that's not just with my baits. That's with, a lot of other ones too. It's just, you gotta put them in the right location.
Sure. And let's face it, and a walking bait like that's a bait. Some of them are so erratic. It might be a planer board bait. You can't even run it behind the boat with other lures, not everything plays nice with others. Okay. That's something, especially trolling. I don't care what kind of leader you're running, what kind of set you're running, what kind of rods you're running, what kind of bait it is. Sometimes that bait has to be, it has to be out on its own, or it's going to just tangle you up really, really, really bad. So, but no, I really, really, I think that's good stuff from both you guys, with the leaders and everything. And you're going to have all this stuff we talked about at the Ohio show. John, you're going to have it at all the shows you're doing, correct?
Yep, absolutely. Along with High Seas Braid, an Aqua Traction display. And like I said, at Ohio, I'll be bringing some Musky Mayhem product with. So a lot of different stuff to take a look at.
Sure. All right. Well, good deal. Well, guys, hey, I really appreciate it. Hopefully this wasn't too much of a hassle. I do like this new format that I'm playing with here. I think it could be good. Guys are going to learn a lot. I'm still learning. Guys, I know you're watching this. You're probably thinking this is dumb. You're dumb. And I would say, Mom, get off the internet. This is, I think it's something that we could really do something with here. And I'm really excited about the future of the podcast and the future of where we're headed. So guys, I do appreciate it. And I'm going to